In the gray drizzle of a Seattle morning, 17-year-old Elias Navarro walked through the crowded halls of Rainier High School, his shoulders slightly hunched, his steps measured. He was the kind of kid who moved like he was trying not to take up too much space, head down, earbuds in, blending into the blur of backpacks and sneakers. But one thing about Elias always stood out: the scarf. It was a vibrant, hand-woven piece, a cascade of crimson, gold, and indigo threads that draped over his shoulders, no matter the weather. The scarf was old, its edges frayed, the colors softened by years of wear. To Elias, it was more than fabric, it was a tether to his past, a promise he carried quietly. The scarf had belonged to his grandmother, Alma Navarro, a weaver from a small Oaxacan village who had immigrated to the U.S. in the 1970s. Elias barely remembered her, she'd passed when he was 6, but he could still picture her hands, calloused and quick, moving over a loom in their cramped apartment. The scarf was her last gift to him, handed over with a whisper, "This is our story, Mijo. Wear it when you need to feel strong." He didn't understand then, but by high school, he wore it every day, even when the sun broke through Seattle's clouds, even when the rain soaked its edges. It made him feel rooted, like he carried her strength with him. At Rainier High, though, the scarf was a target. "Yo, Elias, you auditioning for a wizard movie?" Jamal Carter, a senior with a loud laugh and a basketball scholarship, would call out in the cafeteria. "That thing's older than my grandma's couch." His girlfriend, Kaylee Tran, would giggle, snapping a photo for her group chat. Others joined in snickers, whispers, the occasional tug at the scarf as Elias passed by. "What's with the blanket, dude? You cold or just extra?" The teasing wasn't always cruel, but it was constant, a low hum that followed him from homeroom to the bus stop. Elias never responded. He'd adjust the scarf, tighten his grip on his backpack, and keep walking. Silence, he'd learned, was armor. His mother, Rosa, worked double shifts at a community health clinic, so Elias kept the teasing to himself. She had enough to carry bills, long hours, the weight of raising him alone after his father left. The scarf was his burden, his choice. He could have left it at home, swapped it for a hoodie like everyone else, but every morning, standing before his mirror, he'd drape it over his shoulders. It wasn't about style or defiance, it was about memory. The scarf's intricate patterns, woven by Alma's hands, told stories he barely knew, of Zapotec traditions, of resistance, of a woman who'd crossed borders with nothing but her skill and her will. In his junior year, the teasing sharpened. Jamal and his crew, Kaylee, Marcus Reed, and a quiet kid named Devin who always smirked but rarely spoke, made it a game. They'd mimic wrapping imaginary scarves around their necks, bowing dramatically as Elias walked by. "All hail the Scarf King!" Jamal would shout, earning laughs from half the lunchroom. Once, after gym, Elias found the scarf stuffed into a locker room sink, damp and crumpled. He pulled it out, heart pounding, and dried it carefully at home, never telling Rosa. He didn't want her to see him break. His history teacher, Ms. Delgado, noticed the scarf but never commented. She'd seen Elias's grades, steady BS, nothing flashy, and his quiet demeanor. Once, after a lesson on indigenous resistance movements, she asked him to stay after class. "You okay, Elias?" she said, her voice soft but probing. He nodded, adjusting the scarf. "You sure?" she pressed, glancing at it. He nodded again, and she let it go. He wished she'd asked more, but he didn't know how to explain the scarf's weight, not its physical heft, but the way it held him together. At home, Elias kept a small wooden box under his bed, filled with Alma's things, a faded photo of her at her loom, a letter she'd written to Rosa in Spanish, a tiny clay figure of a bird. He'd pull it out sometimes, tracing the scarf's patterns, wondering about the woman who'd made it. Rosa didn't talk much about her mother, only that Alma had been fierce, a weaver who'd taught herself to read, who'd marched for workers' rights in Oaxaca before coming to the States. She never stopped moving, Rosa once said, her voice heavy with something unspoken. Even when the world told her to sit still. One night, Elias found a video online of Oaxacan weavers, their hands dancing over looms, creating patterns that looked like his scarf. He watched for hours, imagining Alma's hands, her stories woven into every thread. The scarf wasn't just fabric, it was a map of survival, of a woman who'd carried her culture across borders. He wore it to school the next day, even after Marcus accidentally bumped into him, knocking his books to the floor. "Watch it, scarf guy," Marcus muttered. Elias picked up his things, adjusted the scarf, and kept walking. By spring, the teasing had become a quiet kind of cruelty, the kind that didn't need words. Kids would fall silent when Elias entered a room, their eyes flicking to the scarf, then away. He ate lunch alone at a corner table, the scarf draped over his lap like a shield. He wasn't invisible, he was too visible, the scarf a beacon for judgment. Still, he wore it. It was his grandmother's voice, her strength, her refusal to fade. And somewhere deep, Elias felt it was his refusal too. But change was coming, though it didn't look like much at first. An email arrived on a rainy Tuesday, subject, Civic Leadership Summit. Elias's name was on the list of selected students, nominated by Ms. Delgado. He almost ignored it. Rainier High's selected kids were usually athletes or debate team stars, not quiet guys with old scarves. But Ms. Delgado caught him after class. "You're going," she said, "no room for argument. You've got something to say, Elias, even if you don't know it yet." He didn't argue. Maybe it was her certainty, or maybe he just wanted a day away from the lunchroom stares. The summit was in Olympia, a 2-hour bus ride south. Elias boarded the bus, scarf wrapped tight, and took a window seat. Jamal and Kaylee were there, snapping selfies, laughing loud. No one spoke to Elias, and he didn't mind. He watched the rain streak the windows, his fingers tracing the scarf's threads. Whatever this summit was, it couldn't be worse than another day at Rainier High. He didn't know it yet, but the scarf and the legacy it carried was about to rewrite his story. The Olympia Civic Center loomed like a glass fortress, all sharp angles and polished floors. Elias shuffled in with the Rainier High group, his scarf drawing glances from students across the state. The auditorium was packed, hundreds of juniors and seniors, some in crisp ROTC uniforms, others scribbling notes before the first speaker even started. Elias found a seat near the back, the scarf tucked close, and tried to disappear into the crowd. The morning dragged, a state senator droned about civic duty, a non-profit director pitched volunteer programs, a mayor told a story about community gardens that felt rehearsed. Elias doodled in his notebook, half listening, wondering why Ms. Delgado thought he belonged here. Then, just before lunch, the announcer's voice cut through the hum. "Please welcome Dr. Sofia Morales, renowned anthropologist and cultural historian." The room shifted. Dr. Morales walked to the stage, not in a suit, but in a vibrant woven shawl, her gray-streaked hair pulled back, her presence commanding without effort. She didn't smile or wave, she just stood there, letting the room settle. "I study the stories we carry," she began, her voice steady, like a river carving stone. "Not just in books, but in the things we hold, objects that speak when we can't." Elias sat up straighter. Dr. Morales spoke of textiles, of how indigenous weavers across the Americas encoded history in their work, patterns that told of migrations, resistance, survival. She showed slides of Zapotec weavings, their intricate designs glowing on the screen. Elias's hand drifted to his scarf, his heart quickening. She was talking about his grandmother's world, his world. "These aren't just crafts," she said. "They're archives. They're proof of who we are." The room was rapt, but Elias felt like she was speaking to him alone. When she finished, students surged forward for photos, but Elias stayed seated, his fingers tracing the scarf's patterns. Dr. Morales descended the stage, nodding at a few teachers, shaking hands. Then her eyes caught something, his scarf. She paused, changed direction, and walked toward him. The room seemed to slow as she stopped in front of him, her gaze fixed on the crimson and gold threads. "That's Zapotec, isn't it?" she said, not a question but a recognition. Elias swallowed, nodding. "My grandmother made it." Dr. Morales leaned closer, her fingers hovering over the scarf's edge. "This pattern, it's from the Sierra Juarez, early 1970s. It's a story of resilience, of community." Her eyes met his, sharp and kind. "Who was she?" "Alma Navarro," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Morales's expression shifted, like a door unlocking. "Alma," she repeated. "I studied her work in Oaxaca, years ago. She was a master weaver, a leader in her village. Her designs were in museums before she left for the States." Elias stared, his throat tight. No one had ever spoken of his grandmother like this, like she was someone who mattered beyond their small apartment. "You knew her?" he asked. Dr. Morales nodded. "Not personally, but her work was legendary. She wove stories of resistance into every piece. This scarf, it's not just fabric. It's her voice." A few students nearby turned, curious. Jamal, standing a few rows up, froze, watching. Dr. Morales didn't notice. She touched the scarf lightly. "You wear this every day?" Elias nodded. "Then you're carrying her legacy. That's no small thing." The words hit Elias like a wave: pride, grief, something he couldn't name. Dr. Morales turned to a teacher nearby, Ms. Delgado, who'd been watching. "I'd like to speak at Rainier High," she said. "About Alma Navarro, about what it means to carry history." Ms. Delgado nodded, stunned. "Would that be okay with you?" Dr. Morales asked Elias. He managed a nod, words failing him. She smiled, brief but warm, and walked away, leaving the auditorium buzzing. On the bus ride back, the air felt different. Jamal didn't make a single scarf joke. Kaylee kept glancing at Elias, her phone untouched. Elias stared out the window, the scarf's weight lighter somehow. Dr. Morales's words echoed, "You're carrying her legacy." For the first time, he felt seen, not as a joke, but as someone with a story worth telling. Back at Rainier High, the news spread like wildfire. By Monday, whispers about Dr. Morales's visit filled the halls. "Elias's scarf is, like, famous or something," a sophomore muttered in algebra. A girl in English asked him if his grandmother was some kind of artist. Elias didn't know how to answer, he just nodded, the scarf draped over his shoulders, its colors brighter in his mind. Ms. Delgado pulled him aside after class. "Dr. Morales called," she said, her eyes bright. "She's coming next week. She wants to talk about your grandmother, about Zapotec weaving, about legacy." Elias blinked, the weight of it sinking in. "She asked if you'd introduce her." His stomach twisted. Speak? In front of the whole school? He'd spent years avoiding attention, but Ms. Delgado's look, steady, expectant, made him nod. At home, Elias told Rosa everything. She listened, her coffee mug untouched, her eyes distant. When he finished, she stood and pulled a dusty photo album from a shelf. Inside were pictures of Alma, young, fierce, standing by her loom, her hands blurred with motion. "She'd be proud of you," Rosa said, her voice thick. She always said weaving was her way of fighting, for our people, our stories. She handed Elias a small notebook, its pages filled with Alma's handwriting, sketches of patterns, notes in Spanish. "She'd want you to have this." The week before the assembly, the school felt different. Teachers wore sharper clothes, the principal made daily announcements about our honored guest. Jamal approached Elias at his locker, Marcus and Kaylee trailing behind. "Yo, your grandma was, like, a big deal?" Jamal asked, no trace of his usual smirk. Elias shrugged. "She was just, her." Jamal nodded, almost respectful. "That's cool, man." Kaylee hesitated, then added, "Sorry about, you know." Elias didn't respond, but he noticed the silence that followed, no snickers, no jabs. The night before the assembly, Elias sat with Alma's notebook, tracing her sketches. The scarf lay across his lap, its patterns matching the ones she'd drawn. He realized it wasn't just about carrying her legacy, it was about adding to it. He practiced his introduction, his voice shaky but growing steadier. He wasn't just Elias, the quiet kid with the weird scarf. He was Alma's grandson, and that meant something. The gymnasium was packed, every seat filled, parents lining the walls. Posters announced Dr. Sofia Morales, with a photo of a Zapotec weaving next to her name. Elias stood backstage, the scarf draped over his shoulders, his hands sweaty. Ms. Delgado squeezed his arm. "You've got this." He wasn't sure he did, but he stepped to the podium anyway. "I'm Elias Navarro," he said, his voice cracking at first, then steadying. "This scarf was made by my grandmother, Alma Navarro. She was a weaver, a storyteller, a fighter. I wear it to remember her." The gym was silent, every eye on him. He introduced Dr. Morales, then stepped back, his heart pounding but lighter. Dr. Morales took the stage, her shawl vibrant under the lights. She spoke of Alma's work, of Zapotec weavers who preserved history through their looms, of resilience in the face of erasure. She showed slides of Alma's designs, including the scarf Elias wore, now projected 10 feet tall. "This is what legacy looks like," she said, pointing to Elias. "It's not loud. It's steady. It's brave." The gym erupted in applause. Jamal stood first, clapping hard. Kaylee followed, then Marcus, then the whole room. Elias felt the scarf's weight, not heavy now, but warm, like Alma's hands on his shoulders. After, students crowded him, asking about the scarf, about Alma. Teachers shook his hand. Rosa, in the front row, wiped her eyes. In the weeks that followed, Rainier High changed. A textile arts club started, inspired by Alma's story. Elias joined, teaching younger kids to weave. Jamal stopped by once, tried a loom, and stayed. The scarf wasn't a joke anymore, it was a symbol, a bridge. Elias walked taller, not because the teasing stopped, but because he knew who he was, Alma's grandson, carrying her story, weaving his own.